Amazing. Hello, YouTube. Welcome to the show's 50th episode extravaganza. Today we are talking the Twin Peaks movie, the 1992 film Twin Peaks: Fire Walk with Me. So enjoy. So we're gonna count you down, and we're gonna clap, and then I will start talking. So already, gonna wait for Ollie to. Okay. All right. So I'm gonna count us down. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Clap. Perfect. Welcome back. This is the show. I am Jay. That's Aaron.
Hey.
And that's Tony.
Hello.
And we are talking Twin Peaks: Fire Walk with Me, the Twin Peaks movie. Very different, I think, fair to say, huh?
Yeah, it's categorized as psychological horror on Wikipedia.
I'd say
that. I wouldn't say it surprises me, but I guess I didn't really think about it that way whenever I was thinking back to it. There's a lot of story that really is developed in Fire Walk with Me for the Twin Peaks lore, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of weird things. First off, and I got to ask about Gordon's mother's girl. Did that sequence with Kiefer Sutherland and the was it Chet Desmond? That's what it was. When they were getting the Blue Rose information, and then they kind of break it down and interpret what each piece means. Was that Lynch giving training wheels to the audience for how to watch this movie?
I don't know. I liked that part though. I liked Kiefer Sutherland. Are we gonna find out what happened to Desmond?
We'll have to see what happened to Desmond. But I really feel like that whole sequence was kind of I don't want to say litmus test, but a blueprint for, hey, you're gonna have to interpret things as we go forward.
Well, I think I failed the test. So could you help me out here? And maybe you said training wheels. So like what I guess tell me about what was the symbolism that you got from it.
Well, no. They go through it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like they show it.
No, of course.
And then they're in the car, and they're like, okay, so there's a sour face. That means we're gonna have resistance from local PD, right? And each different thing had a meaning based off of what they saw.
Oh,
right?
Okay. I think I might have misunderstood what you meant. I thought you were saying that those symbols recurred in the rest of the film. And
No.
I missed it if they did.
No. How they have that sequence at the beginning, and then they're in the car and they're talking about, well, that was kind of weird, right? And he's like, yeah, but each thing means something. Let's break it down. I'll explain it to you. Mm-hmm. He says, so sour face. She had a sour look on her face. That means that we're gonna have problems with the local PD. She's got her hand in her pocket. That means that they're going to be hiding something, and that she's wearing a designer dress because they took in the seams. Designer dress is code in the FBI for drugs. So this has something to do with drugs. And also she's wearing a blue rose, which was Gordon's symbol for classified cases that, were top secret. So there's this sequence right off the bat after Chet Desmond gets a call while he's arresting prostitutes and a bus driver. That sequence seemed a bit funny to y'all too. Like I was sitting there, I was like, what is happening right now?
School bus driver, right?
School bus driver and all the kids banging on the windows. Like, are they on their way to class and he just picked up a couple of ladies of the evening? But I just feel like that was really interesting. Like, I feel like he was supposed to set the audience up to be like, okay, I'm going to have to interpret what I see as I watch this movie. Maybe in a way that Twin Peaks didn't prepare people for the show. Mm-hmm. Which is why I thought it was like right in your face right at the beginning.
I think that's a good point. That's not something that occurred to me, but looking back on it, I feel like you're right that David Lynch was telling us where he was going right from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
I
I kind of like that too.
I might have just been distracted by how much I loved seeing Kiefer Sutherland. I'm
Disheveled Kiefer Sutherland.
I'm such a sucker for guest stars, and that's something that I've really enjoyed out of this show and this movie as well. We got Kiefer Sutherland, we got David Bowie.
Mm-hmm.
We're
not going to talk about Judy. The whole beginning sequence with the FBI is pretty bizarre.
Yeah. So is this like a X-Files like corner of the FBI that we've been exposed to?
Like they deal with the weird.
Yeah, because we got Coop who has these visions, and obviously he has like some sort of, well, if we believe what the show portrays, he's got some sort of like paranormal kind of dream abilities. And then, yeah, I just don't. It just
no. I think like, you're right.
All this stuff is too weird for a normal FBI.
I think that's the significance of the blue rose. Whenever they were saying, "Hey, this is a blue rose case," so within the FBI, Gordon has cases, or at least the FBI has cases, which are blue rose cases, and those have something to do with maybe more spiritual, unexplainable, alien, foreign, however you want to kind of put it. But at least that's what I'm left with the interpretation of.
I think this show has a very surrealistic portrayal of the criminal justice system.
That's true.
And that extends to its portrayal of the FBI and how it operates. And it seemed to me like this show was totally uninterested in filling in any of those gaps about whether or not these were a special task force or if these were just run-of-the-mill FBI agents. Like, for example, Albert's, I got the impression from Albert's his first appearance in season 1 that he was the medical examiner agent.
Mm-hmm.
But that's just kind of dropped. After that, he's just run-of-the-mill FBI agent. So I think that Twin Peaks is very interested in some things, like how it makes you feel, and just kind of making you question your senses. And I think there's other things that Twin Peaks is totally uninterested in. A lot of those are the details, but that's just not what this franchise is about.
God damn, you people are confusing. I think you've hit the nail on the head. I think that Twin Peaks' presentation, again, it hits a lot of what I would say dreamlike. And again, in dreams, like things seem right, but often they're not. I don't know. A lot of times when movies depict dreams, like you just kind of accept the things that are not correct as just normal, right? And so because of that, kind of following that motif, like for example, in the FBI building, whenever Dale runs in and he's like, Gordon, I'm worried about today because of my dream. Then he runs over to the cameras and he does this little like shimmy back and forth in front of the camera. And then when Philip Jeffries, the late great David Bowie comes on, we see Dale walk back to the camera, but on the screen, Dale stays on the screen. And David Bowie, Phil Jeffries, walks around Dale while Dale is watching it on the screen, and Dale screams to Gordon and runs in there, right? And we have that whole weird confrontation, and then Jeffries disappears, just vanishes. And they're saying that he never came in, he never walked in, but they go look at the camera footage and confirm it's true. He did walk in. But they never address Cooper standing there. They just blow right past that. They don't even mention it. Whereas to me, that was a huge moment. Like I was like, whoa, right? Like that was weird. And it was just left and it's part of that dream sequence type feeling, right? Like it just, we move past it, keep going.
It's so funny you point that out, because in so much media with supernatural qualities, it's never on camera, and sometimes the show goes to great pains to explain away why it isn't. Well,
Mm-hmm.
Twin Peaks here, they've got it on camera, but nobody really seems to care. Nobody
Yeah.
really seems to think that's odd.
Or explain it in any way.
Yeah. They're just not interested in that part of the story.
So, but the whole FBI sequence at the beginning, I think, is really interesting. It sets up a lot of weird kind of stuff. But then we get into the actual kind of meat of the story, if you will, Fire Walk With Me, and that's the story of Laura, right? And her ultimate demise. And I have to say, I was not impressed with Maddie's performance in Twin Peaks. Like, it was just not great. But Laura's performance in Fire Walk With Me is fucking phenomenal. Like the manic, like almost look on her face in the car with Leland, the like crazy swings in her attitude and her behavior. I don't know. To me, I felt like she fucking nailed this as someone who was, kind of going crazy or going to 11 as she was going, out.
Totally agree. Totally agree. She was excellent in portraying somebody in an incredible amount of pain who didn't know what to do about it and was just kind of flailing, and nobody around her was reaching out to help. And that pain was really, really well communicated. So big props to Cheryl Lee for that performance.
No, she really nailed it. She knocked it out of the park. I also just want to say, props to whoever they recast as Donna. Substantially just better. Just overall made the movie better to have this Donna over the original Donna.
It was like, she's barely in the movie. I'm like, this Donna's better.
So much better already.
I did get a.
We saw her boobs.
I did get a little confused at times because I feel like I'm able to recognize old Donna a lot easier just because we've watched 30 episodes of old Donna.
Yep.
So there were times when I was a little confused as to, is that new Donna or is that Ronette?
Yeah.
But yeah, I have to agree. And while we're talking about performances, I think Ray Wise as Leland, I think he had an impossible task to have to act out what we all knew was going to happen.
Yeah.
And he also did an absolutely fantastic job in delivering that performance.
Yeah, the sequence that stand out the most to me, the Dirty Fingers sequence, where he's like grabbing her fingers, look under these fingernails. That one, but also after the night that Laura realizes it's him. That the whole first of all, I want to kind of I think Sarah Palmer was 100% aware of what was going on. I think Leland Palmer was 100% aware of what was going on. I think that we are led to believe that Leland was a little more innocent than he was. But I think Sarah knew, because like that whole sequence with her getting the milk and him turning on the fan and her just kind of like checking out. And the next morning, Leland looks fucking immaculate. Laura and Sarah look absolutely just demolished. Right? And he's like, what's wrong with everyone? And Laura is like freaking out. Right? I don't know. To me, the performances there, that's the parts that just like blew me away with this movie. Like standalone, this movie probably doesn't make any sense to someone who just would watch it on Amazon. But man, is it well done in my opinion.
Well,
by far,
I'm sorry.
I was just saying, it's by far the best from season 1, season 2 in the movie. It's like, for me, head and shoulders above. I guess because it's free from the reins of network cable. Like, I feel like it really shines, and this is like easily the best piece so far. So it has me excited for being on Showtime, not being restricted again. So I'm excited for the return. But yeah, this movie was pretty awesome.
So going back to what you said a moment ago, Aaron, about how much Leland and Sarah Palmer knew, Do you mean that they knew that Laura was being abused, or do you mean that they knew that Laura was being abused and it was somewhat being caused by a supernatural being?
I don't know that it was necessarily that they knew caused by supernatural being. I think that number one, the way it was portrayed, and perhaps this was intentional, is to portray that the mother was turning a blind eye, willful blindness, if you will, Jay, to the fact that Leland was doing this. That's not that big of a house, you know? And unless you're drugged out of your mind, asleep, what's going on in that room with Laura screaming, right? And all that's going to cause a ruckus. Someone's going to hear that.
Yeah.
He's been doing this since she was 12 is kind of what was insinuated whenever in the journal, I believe. So that's numerous years of it. Also the whole backstory being laid out with Teresa Banks and the creepy moment whenever he's like, "You look just like my Laura," like, that whole sequence. It just Leland was not a good guy, right? I feel like we're left with the taste that Leland was more or less taken advantage of, but I think that Albert was more correct when he said that maybe Bob's the evil that men do, or at least they just amplify it.
Definitely after watching Fire Walk with Me, I think I definitely agree with you that Leland knew what he was doing. Sarah knew what was going on and turned that blind eye. And that's where this show, I think, for me, fails a little bit, is that it can't seem to decide whether Bob is metaphorical or not, because he's very much real, but in this other interpretation, how much Bob is at fault for what Leland has done to Laura, walking away from the movie, it really feels like that the weight of culpability is much heavier on Leland than on Bob coming after the movie.
Well, Bob says at the very end, Leland says, "I never knew you knew it was me." And then Bob says, "I always thought you thought it was me." And so I think that there is a little bit of a blurred line between Bob and Leland. I do think that Bob probably pushes Leland to act out things that he was probably already predisposed to, but Bob is definitely a being. I just think that it gets back to this, and I think this is something that we see, is that people always tell their own story, present themselves in the light most favorable to themselves, right? Like Sarah Palmer can't admit that she knew. Sarah Palmer, but look at her performance. Look at the guttural crying and screams and just wailing. Like, that wailing is, in my opinion, kind of gives way to proof that they're aware. That's kind of what I was saying last time in season 2 with Leland and some of his other weirder behavior. Like, it's maybe Bob was blocking his consciousness to some degree, but your subconsciousness is still there. And I felt like that was driving a certain level of guilt. I
don't know. It was just really good. And I don't know if someone had a conversation with the sound mixer and they're like, "Hey, can we make this music a little bit quieter?" And it did wonders for the movie also.
But that scene in was it Bang Bang, the bar, where it's so loud that you can't quite make out what they're saying. That sequence was cool.
They have subtitles on, right?
They do, but even in the subtitles, there were moments where it would say like inaudible.
Yeah.
And I read that in the UK, they did not include the subtitles because David Lynch was going back and forth so much on whether or not he wanted to include subtitles at all that the deadline ran, they weren't included, and they couldn't afford to reprint the film with the subtitles. So if you watched in the UK, that whole sequence, I mean, that was like 20 minutes?
Yeah.
You just got no idea what they're saying. And
does that remind you of that episode of How I Met Your Mother where they go to the club and everything is miscommunicated? Like, I don't know if you've ever been to a bar or a club like that. Like, that felt immersive.
Yeah, it's definitely true to reality.
All right, it's been a while since like season 1. I definitely don't remember from season 2, but like, was Bobby killing that guy alluded to at all in season 1, and I just forgot about it, or
yes,
it's completely new? It
no,
was
no, no. In Laura's journal, she says Bobby killed a guy. Okay. What I didn't realize is that's the cop that's fucking with Chet Desmond back at the police department at where Teresa Banks disappeared or whatever.
Oh, really? I didn't. Yeah, my brain didn't put that together.
I didn't put it together. I was doing some more reading, and it was, that's the same mustache guy who was screwing with Chet Desmond at the beginning.
Right.
I don't know. I personally don't know why, but that there is that connection back to the beginning there. But no, I think that sequence is important because when Laura's like saying you shot Mike, I feel like to some degree it's showing Laura's break from reality. Like she's cracking even further, right? Under the stress, the pressure, the drugs, all of it. And also,
it definitely felt like that scene was there to highlight the kind of cocaine part of Laura's story.
Yeah,
because we see her a little bit with that addict behavior of needing it beyond any consideration for anything else,
and not being rational, not understanding the situation, not appreciating the gravity of the situation. Also, Bobby trying to bury that guy in like 6 inches of dirt.
Oh my God! Yes, and he's just tossing not even full handfuls of dirt onto the guy's back. I lost it laughing at that.
I love Bobby still. Like, Bobby is such a weird character.
I guess that's why I brought up, because like I feel like he was like maybe not destroyed, but like he was really messed up from that act. But then season 1, I don't get any sort of. I mean, it's literally right after that.
Yeah, but you got to remember, like, there's the barking sequence. Remember the barking sequence in jail? Bobby's pretty unhinged at the very, very beginning. I think he calms down some with Shelley. But like, you don't remember that scene where they're in the jail and they bring in James and him and Mike are just like barking like incessantly. Like it's a bit weird. Bobby's a bit weird at the beginning. I think that he kind of settles after a little while, after the death of Laura.
She doesn't put anything about Coop being in the, like, good Coop being in the Black Lodge or anything.
No, that's never mentioned, but according to an interview with Lynch, he said that she did write that down in the journal.
She did. So like, I guess the Black Lodge transcends time and space.
That's what I'm getting, is that there seems to be a disconnect from the linearness of time. Because like, it's clear that Laura is dreaming about Cooper before Cooper comes to Twin Peaks. Then Cooper's dreaming about Laura after Laura's dead, right? And then Laura's dreaming about Annie in the Red Room before Annie even comes back to Twin Peaks. And she's wearing Caroline's, dress, and she's got a bloody face, which is how season 2 ends, right? So in some weird way, it seems that the Black Lodge, White Lodge, the Red Room don't seem to be connected to our time, just to our space.
Yeah, you definitely get that sense from the way that people move and the way that they speak. I think that's another way that they're telling us that time runs in a different fashion there.
Yeah, especially the giant and the arm. She is full of secrets.
I guess maybe we probably won't, but I hope we figure out like who, yeah, the giant and like the grandmother and the grandkid are.
So yeah,
At
the
times, the
room.
grandmother confuses me because like at times I think they're like they're kind of trying to be helpful against Bob, but then I don't know, they seem to also be leading her
Can I give you
astray
my
too. So,
theory on this? Because
sure.
me and Chris have talked a lot about this, and I think that like we get Bob and we get Mike, right? And Mike, the way Mike kind of tells the story is that him and Bob were partners, and then he got disgusted with the way and they're essentially going out to get pain and suffering, which is the garmonbosia, right? Which is what they feed on. So they go out and they're causing pain and suffering in our world.
Are they lawyers?
Yeah, probably. Leland. So they're going around causing pain and suffering, but Bob is murdering people, causing people to cause great harm. And Mike becomes disgusted with this, and he cuts off his evil portion, which is his arm, which becomes the arm in the Red Room that manifests as Philip Gerard, the one-armed man, losing his arm in our world. So we then have Mike is still from the Black Lodge, but he works with Cooper and with Harry Truman and all them to try and find Bob, to try and stop Bob. But this in the same way, he still wants Garmonbosia. The old woman and the little and her grandson, they also are from the Black Lodge, as we saw in Fire Walk with Me. There's that sequence where the arm, Bob, the old woman, the little boy, the guy with the white Pinocchio nose makeup, jumping on the box, like they're all in this room, which appears to be the Black Lodge, from based off of what we're seeing with the Formica table. And I think they all want Garmonbosia. They all feed off of that, but they're not all like Bob, where they have to cause death, right? The old woman and her nephew were next to the recluse guy, the guy that was inside of his Herald, right? The agoraphobe. Well, he's going to have a lot of pain and suffering from being afraid to go outside, right? So they were feeding off of his Garmonbosia. We have them appearing in different places at different times. Mike also travels around, as a shoe salesman, apparently meeting people and getting it that way. And then we see in Fire Walk with Me when Bob comes back to the Black Lodge, and the arm and Mike are sitting there, and the arm touches Mike's like stub, for lack of a better term, and they start talking. They say, "We want our Garmonbosia," and he shoots the blood on the ground, and then it turns into corn, and they eat it. Like even if they don't like what Bob is doing and they're willing to help stop him, they are. It's almost like they're not necessarily willing to stop getting the Garmonbosia, the pain and suffering. So they're not good players, so to speak.
Kind of like Sarah Palmer, huh?
Kind of like Sarah Palmer. Yeah, they're there. They know what's going on, and they're willing to kind of help, but they also are not willing to stop it completely. That's what I think. That's how I've interpreted it with up to the movie to now.
Aaron, have you ever seen Twin Peaks: The Missing Pieces?
I have not.
As I'm sure you're aware, it's basically extra footage from this movie that, like, the original runtime was like 5 hours, and the studio said, no, you got to cut that down. And so they cut out quite a lot, and it was enough that they were able to reassemble into another feature film that they released in 2014.
Oh, wow.
But I haven't seen it, but one of the things that I wanted from this movie but didn't get was a lot of the peripheral characters from the TV show.
Mm-hmm.
We've got no Lucy and Andy.
Mm-hmm.
We've got no Audrey.
Yeah.
We've got no Big Ed.
It's Audrey that Jane wanted. you didn't really care about the other ones. That's what
It's always
left a couple
it's always-
first.
Well, and
I want that Audrey.
with that, it does make sense that the movie being limited to 2 hours, we got the little bit of FBI story, and then we got pretty much Laura's story.
right.
But no, I so are you saying that Missing Pieces has some of that additional like footage that would have kind of filled in some of the other story?
Yeah, from what I understand, the sheriff, both the Haywards, the uh, Big Ed, as well as Nadine, Pete, Jocelyn Packard, Lucy, Andy, Hawk, Dr. Jacoby, and both of the Briggs parents all filmed scenes for this movie, but they got cut, and those scenes were reassembled in this other feature film.
Oh wow. I may want to watch it at some point.
For me subjectively, the change in tone didn't work for me. I preferred the tension breaking that we got from some of the sitcomier aspects, including basically all those people who I just named, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So I was missing that from the film. And I think part of this might be that I've never seen anything else by David Lynch. This is the only David Lynch product I've ever seen. And I think from especially the movie onward, it's, full strength Lynch. And
yeah, it's definitely Lynch on, unrestrained, if you will.
And I'm not liking it as much, to be honest. So what I was hoping you could do for me is to kind of pitch for me what is that makes David Lynch and his style great.
Okay, so I guess for me, one, and I think that this kind of gets back to cultural stuff. For a long time, like in Hollywood and storytelling, it feels like it has gotten less and less interesting. The formula has gotten more and more narrow. I think even I can kind of demonstrate this with like after Guardians of the Galaxy came out, like half of the Marvel movies started following the Guardians of the Galaxy model, right? Where they proved it was a successful model or formula, so they then started employing the formula. It's part of the reason why I really struggled to keep watching those kind of movies, is that it didn't feel like everything felt regurgitated. Lynch feels fresh, even if it is bizarre. I will say on the front end, I love art that throws me for a loop, that makes me think, that makes me have to decipher, interpret, uh, talk with people about what we just saw, what we experienced, what the significance was, what the meanings were, what the layers were. And I feel that with anything like Marvel, Disney level, you get what you get. You get what you see. And that is it. There is a surface level story that is told. You get that surface level entertainment, and you go back to your life. Whereas with, especially with me and Christy have been talking about Twin Peaks now, like almost consistently every other day. Like, what about this? Whenever this happened, do you remember this? Whenever Laura said this thing, do you remember her saying that? And then the significance. Like it turned into this unraveling, bizarro mystery that I can't just look up on the internet and be like, this is what this means. Because there's like 17 different interpretations as to what that could mean, and so I get to kind of be a part of the storytelling because I get to interpret what things mean as they're unfolding, because there's not a lot of context, there's not a lot of explanation. You're kind of left with, I saw this, and because of what I saw, I get to then interpret it. And that's kind of what I've been doing here with Fire Walk With Me. Really kind of turned it up to 11. Is there's so many sequences that kind of peel back some more of that world that we saw in Twin Peaks, that was underneath the facade of everyday life, and things that are happening in the town and things like that. That there is this underpinning, this underworld, these aspects of our world that are not, we don't shed light on. and we don't fully want to understand. And, but they're still there, and there's this darkness that's there. And those of us who do go looking don't quite understand what we find. So I feel like I've kind of gone on a little monologue here with this, but that is one of the, I guess, aspects of Lynchian filmmaking that drives my curiosity, is because I kind of get to be an active participant in understanding what the story is and what it means to me. I do like the sitcom-y stuff. It was really endearing this time around, but there was less to interpret. I feel like now we're getting into just full blown Lynch. We're given some more leeway to understand the significance of these things, to evaluate them for ourselves, to weigh the evidence of who we trust, who we don't, whose version of the events as they were recited by Leland and Bob, or as we saw them for ourselves. So, does that help? Does that provide any insight into why I like this kind of stuff?
No, absolutely, absolutely. I think what you said about how it's open to interpretation, I think is something I need to keep in mind a little bit more, and uh, just have some courage in my convictions and my opinions of what I see, because I think something that's a barrier for me in this sort of this sort of art is that I'm often too worried about my opinion being right. And when you just kind of remove the pressure of, hey man, it doesn't matter. Like, this is a piece of art, and you know, appreciate it for what it is. I think is maybe a mindset that I'll try to use going forward a little more.
I think that it will serve you to, in a certain sense, take a step back and experience the show moving forward, because it is, like I said, I have been very deliberate with my words from the very beginning that we started this process. I said The Return is one of my favorite pieces of art, and it is. It's still, and so far I'm confident that it is going to be that at the end of this, that I say, yes, this is amazing. It's bizarre. It's interesting. It's curious. And I hope that you guys are willing to kind of delve into this from that perspective. Think about interpretation. Think about, what is Lynch trying to portray with this? Is it just weird for the sake of weird, or does it represent something? Do these players represent something? Do they represent forces in our world? Is this a critique of something? I do think that there are aspects of it that are a little bit deeper. Like, I agree with you, Jay, that Lynch doesn't take the FBI serious to be like, we're going to do this exactly procedurally correct so that it's a Mindhunter level drama. The FBI is a vehicle for his storytelling, but it doesn't mean that the things that we don't experience through the FBI aren't significant to the interpretation of the overall story, right? So I think that that's where the fun of Twin Peaks is kind of, you get to become a detective. You get to kind of try to be like, put these pieces together as the show unfolds, right? Like, when you see something like the girl running at the very beginning, like, that's never explained, right? The very beginning of season 1, we have this moment where there's a girl screaming and running across an open, like, area outside of one of the windows, and like Donna starts crying. Then we see that again at the beginning of the movie, kind of from a different angle, but still no real explanation as to why. And so, is that because she found out about Laura? Did the news already break? And this is kind of like that? Is there something else going on that's completely unrelated to it? Why did he choose to show that? And because there's no real answer, you're able to kind of take from it whatever you will in trying to pull together this story.
I think I already feel like I need to go back and watch the show again. Like, because, man, this show, it lulls you into a sense of security that it's just kind of weird and silly at times, but there's so much there, and I feel like there's so much that I missed. there's so much to this show. It's really quite an incredible thing.
I mean, even this time around, like realizing that Annie is wearing Caroline's dress, like I've seen this is my third time around, and I didn't catch that till this time, right? So like that's the other thing I think that I really like about it is that I've come through this journey a couple of times now, and each time through there are different things that stand out. You know, that especially kind of coming back through and seeing things, you know, knowing how the end is, knowing where we go, things like that. That's also really interesting. You know, how things are explained. I also think that with Twin Peaks, you also have a certain part of the fan base that you can take a simple interpretation of Twin Peaks. Girl is murdered. Her father's an abuser. There's an FBI agent who's struggling with his past, but Twin Peaks doesn't require you to accept that that's the only part of the story, right? Twin Peaks leaves open a bunch of different ways to interpret that exact same story and in the context of what's going on, right? And I don't know. I think that that's where I think that you have to kind of open your mind up to looking at things differently. And perhaps that's kind of what Lynch is challenging us to do with his filmmaking, is to not accept that film has to be the way that we've been, you know, it's been prepackaged and sold to us our whole lives. That storytelling can take on different shapes, sizes, avenues. It can gather different feelings and make you take you to places that are uncomfortable, but in a way that makes you understand the gravity of why he took you there. You know, this story, like you said, Leland and his performance of doing the ultimate act of assaulting Laura, you know, his performance is phenomenal, and it's a very creepy sequence. But, you know, I feel like Lynch did a great job of kind of laying out this sequence and telling the story in a way that makes you feel almost palpable the terror that Laura felt. Um, and it's very hard to grasp, like capture those, especially when we talk about how Lynch cast these fucking parts. You know, you look like you're the person that I want to be playing in this role.
There was so much in this movie that I just didn't ever really want to see. You know, like from the obvious of I didn't really want to see Leland rape Laura.
Yeah.
I didn't want to see Jacques Renault in his tidy whities also raping Laura. Uh, that was tough. That was tough to watch.
Mm-hmm.
And but like you said, David Lynch and really any successful filmmaker, they're they're trying to get you to emote.
Mm-hmm.
They're trying to get an emotional reaction from you, and that reaction from me was disgust, but it was a successful eliciting of emotional.
I think he's going for discuss, right?
Yeah, he got it. Yeah.
Tony, what were you saying?
Sorry.
I don't know what I was saying. I really liked it. If the return's more of like the movie, then I'm excited. I don't know, but I like darker things. Like, Jay, how can you say there was no comedic relief with maybe the most laugh out loud line I've ever heard of on this show? You're not a turkey. The turkey's one of the dumbest birds on earth. Gobble, gobble, gobble.
Gone, like a turkey in the corn.
I laughed so hard. I was like, oh my gosh. But I don't know. This is like, what's most impressive in this show is like, well, there's some really good lines in here too, but like the writing for the show, just like either they're so good at just like making stuff fit in a way that makes me believe that they had it planned out the whole time, or they've really just like, it's like crazy to me, the spacing on these things is just like they made this story and this like lore, I guess, and backstory, and then they were committed enough to just like, if it never happened, they didn't care. You know, like everything fits together so nicely. Like this movie basically fills in all the blanks with consistency on like the first and second, really the first season, since it's more of like a prequel, but like it fits in so nicely. You're like, well, they had to have had this all written out, or they co-opted it so well that it looked like it was planned from the start. But I'd like to think that it planned from the beginning, and then like if the movie never happened, they probably never would have shown it. And like this, if this return never happened, I'm sure it does a good job too. It's like they were committed enough to not care, like to not just like throw it all in the first or second season, I guess, is giving respect. But I don't know. I like the darker stuff. I think I like it because it's kind of like I think it's why I like Leftovers. Because Leftovers has that. Well, it's sad and depressing too, but like the main character blacks out, and so there's moments of time you just time skip forward, and people are reacting to situations, and you don't know like why are they reacting this way, like what happened in between, and then you go back and you find out what those missing pieces were, and I feel like it makes the story better, and I feel like that's what this movie was here. Same with like True Detective season 1. True Detective season 1, you're like in, I think you're in present day, or maybe you're in the early 2000s, and you flash back to like the early 90s on their crimes. So you see like the after effects, the aftermath of all these things that you won't find out until later. So I don't know.
Mm-hmm. No,
I like the movie a lot. I think I like that's why I like those shows. That's why I like this movie so much, and I'm looking forward to the return.
it shows a little bit of the dark side of humanity, and again, I think there's a interesting catharsis when we are able to experience without experiencing the suffering of others. You know, I don't ever want to experience what Laura experienced, but understanding like those sequences gives so much better context to Twin Peaks and its story. I honestly feel like even like Fire Walk with Me kind of gives a better context to Donna, like why she kind of adopts this devil may care attitude afterwards.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because like she has this kind of completely different experience with Laura right before she dies, right? And we're kind of seeing her wrestle with, you know, coming from the more sheltered mindset into what, you know, she was seeing Laura do, to what she was doing, to her love for James. So I mean, I can't stand Donna at all as a character, but at least her character makes more sense, in my opinion, after seeing Fire Walk with Me.
That's
So
true.
I think that something that someone told to me one time, and I kind of have taken it for granted, is that horror is one of the last great storytelling genres. That a lot of the filmmaking that happens in action, adventure, comedy, the story doesn't really matter, right? It's an hour and a half, 2 hours of entertainment, right? Action, jokes, romance, whatever. Whereas, in order for a good horror story, such as Fire Walk with Me to an extent, to really do its thing, it has to catch you. It has to hold you. It has to keep you all the way to the end, to the payoff. And that requires good storytelling. So I think that number one, horror gets a bad rap because people just don't like to be scared. But in the same way that you can get a catharsis from feeling sad for something, you can get a catharsis from kind of getting frightened by it too. So I do think that there are some opportunities here in these types of films to have novel and interesting storytelling, and that's another thing that I think that Fire Walk with Me really does well is kind of this interesting and unique way of telling the story, especially because like you can see almost the progression in Laura of her slowly realizing it's Leland, and there's moments where she's like in denial, you know, like whenever she goes into the room when the little boy tells her that basically Bob's looking for her secret journal, and she sees Bob, she runs out, she hides under the bushes, and Leland leaves, and she kind of has this moment of realization, but she has to kind of like stop, right? She can't handle it. It's too much for her psyche. And has to kind of, you know, return to acting normal. And I think that that's probably real. It's probably how people who are suffering from trauma deal with stuff, right? They try and avoid the trauma. Avoidance is a big part of like PTSD and stuff like that.
That's what gives me a little, well, I mean, not to excuse Leland, because I think, like you said, he did know. Like, that gives me a little bit more leeway for Leland because like she didn't know it was her dad this whole time. She's only ever seen Bob. Like Bob's the one who's been actually perpetrating these things against her. Like whether or not Leland knew and didn't do enough to stop it or whatever. But I feel like if there's a silver lining, at least like I guess there's not a silver lining in rape, but at least she was being raped by some
If there
demonic
is,
presence that came in through her window and not her father that she lived with. Like at least she still got to have nice moments with her dad when he wasn't an evil person, I guess.
mm-hmm. Well, we definitely see at the end of season 2 that Leland was in the Red Room, right?
Mm-hmm.
We saw him in there. We've seen Laura in the Red Room numerous times. And we've also seen a doppelganger Laura, which is interesting.
Maddie and Annie, I feel like they're innocent, so I don't know. I guess just anybody can end up there.
Does Bob predate Leland?
Yes, because remember, Leland says, I remember him when I went to my grandfather's lake house or something. He was a neighbor. And so Bob came and inhabited Leland at a young age.
Mm-hmm.
At least that's as far as we know right now.
I wonder if we'll find a backstory that he used to do things to Sarah, and now that's why she hasn't spoken up, because now she gets to sleep and not have them happen to her while they happen to her daughter.
Christy had raised the perspective that we're never told exactly what happened to Annie, but she's of the age group. Like, what if Leland was abusing other girls in that age group? Now, Annie said that it was because of a bad relationship that she tried to commit suicide.
Oh,
but that's all we really get from Annie. Now,
I was disappointed with the 5 seconds of Heather Graham. Yeah.
Yeah, this movie is it's kind of a, I don't want to say bungee jump, but it's very similar to a Lynchian bungee jump because you kind of just get thrown into it. A lot of weird stuff happens up front, then a lot of really intense sequences. I mean, the sequence with Mike confronting Leland in the car, like that, man, that was intense.
Yeah. When you were talking about most memorable sequences from this movie, that's one that will stick in my mind forever. Of the two of them, cars side by side, face to face, screaming at one another,
and the revving of the engine and the horn and the screaming, like just the way Lynch overwhelms your senses in that sequence, right? That's almost as much an important part of the filmmaking there, and making you feel disoriented by the sequence. Yeah. Right? You're not just seeing this happen to Leland, you are experiencing it to some degree. And I think that's another thing that I love about Lynch, is that he's able to bring you into the movie, bring you into the sequence, make you feel a part of that uneasiness in a way that a lot of filmmakers just can't, or don't try to.
You definitely feel Laura's claustrophobia in that moment because she's trapped literally in the car, but with all of these things in her life beyond her control. That was a powerful moment.
Yeah, I think that has to be, of all the sequences, it has to be one of the most powerful sequences in the entire series. Like it was intense. Yeah. That and the reverse scream at the end.
Oh.
Do we have any final thoughts on the movie?
None for me. I'm just looking forward. I'm looking forward to the return.
Try and look at the return through the glasses of interpretation. Try and ask the question, why is Lynch showing us this? Why are we seeing this? What is the significance? And I mean, honestly, Christy started taking notes. Like we went over like all the notes from Fire Walk with Me, because she like wrote down so much stuff. Like she wrote down all the different interpretations at Gordon's mother sister's girl. And we went over that, and that's where we kind of came to the idea that, hey, this kind of feels like Lynch is saying, hey, there's going to be a lot of interpretation as to what's going on. Let me kind of put on the training wheels and show you how to interpret stuff. Now he doesn't explain why any of those interpretations are correct, right? Like it's kind of like showing you how to do it without explaining.
It's like the worst Sherlock Holmes imitation.
I don't get what is that lady even real? Like that's a point that doesn't make sense, because like, okay, everyone's in this little FBI group knows what's going on. Like why did it have to be encrypted when they're in the middle of this random air base? No one's listening to them. Like why did this weird mute woman have to do this little sour face dance shimmy to communicate the information? Like, was she a spirit? Is she some sort of like, do they not know, but she's like a psychic and this is how she reveals like information? Like, I'm just like, why does this even need to happen? Like,
I don't think it needed to happen. I think that gets back to kind of, again, I personally think that whole sequence was there to kind of give the audience a way of watching the film, of looking at it through the eyes of interpreting what's going on. And outside of that, I don't know that it serves much of a purpose beyond that, right? Because very quickly thereafter, things get weird, right? People disappearing and people, staying on camera whenever they're not there. Like we're very quickly thrown into the surreal after that sequence. So that's just the way that I kind of took it. I do think it's a real person. Christy thought it was a guy wearing a wig. And she kind of opined, she was like, it's interesting how open, with Lynch having so much 1950s motif in everything he does, it's interesting how open he is to using transgender stuff in his filmmaking, like with no judgment whatsoever. We get what's her name, Denise, right?
Denise.
And Dale's just kind of like,
Denise was just a transvestite, not really a
I think that's just a dated term. I think that just gets back to the time period of the material. Like that term no longer really is used. I think transgender is just more of our time period. But I don't know. I might be wrong. I might be just ignorant on those subject matters. But I find it interesting. Again, it gets back to my interpretation of the source material, in that nothing is what it seems. That the facade has cracks in it, that the things that we think are true, the things that we think are real, the things that we think are normal rarely really are. And I think that that's why Lynch embraces some of these weird, kooky things, while at the same time trying to keep it anchored to the 1950s motif.
You know that meme with Padme and Anakin, where she like asks him a question, and she's like, "But not that, right?"
Yeah.
He just stares at her. I feel like Lynch was like Cheryl Lee. He's like, "You're gonna make out with literally every dude on this set at some point in this movie," and she's like, "Yeah, not all of them, right?" Everybody had a not a little smooch session, like full on French kiss makeout session with poor Laura Palmer. Felt bad for Cheryl Lee.
Yeah, her topless scene in the school with James felt a bit, not really that smart, but whatever.
Yeah, if you were before I watched this movie, if you had asked me to bet on whose boobs we would see first, or even at all, I would never have bet on Laura.
And this is another point. Is Laura is very much depicted as pretty much the town whore. Like even Ben Horn.
She's just sitting in the bar, and the guy walks up to Jacques Renault, and Jacques like, "Hey, that girl over there." He slides her $50.
Yeah,
and that's it. I mean, I've never bought a hooker,
Laura, but here's the thing: Laura never dresses provocative. Laura is always wearing very conservative, very like dressed down clothing. Right? Like the person who is apparently the like biggest sleeping with everyone, constantly doing drugs. The presentation of her and then who we are led to understand her to be are just completely different, right? And
Right.
Again, maybe I'm harping on this a little too much, but I think it gets back to this imagery about how things are not the way they appear. And I really feel like that is just a huge motif throughout this entire story.
Absolutely.
And I think as we get into the return, it's going to go to 11. Like everything goes to 11 with the return. And I hope that because Jay, this is less sitcom-y, going in, don't expect about. There's going to be moments. There's going to be characters that you love. There's going to be moments that you love. Like I will say that. Like it's not all just the return, or not. It's not all Fire Walk with Me the entire time.
Okay.
But it's a lot more intensity. It's a lot more surrealist, and I think that you do have to take a step back and look at it through the lens of interpretation, and as a little bit of a detective yourself as to what does this mean. Why is this significant? Why am I seeing this? Why is this happening to me right now?
Well, I'm looking forward to it, and I'm most importantly looking forward to talking about it with you two guys.
Yeah.
So it'll be a couple more weeks. We're gonna. What did you say?
One last question.
Sorry,
it's a short one. Do we get cool, awesome new Donna, or do we get old Donna in the return?
We don't get Donna in the return.
Oh, damn it!
The only reason why I say that is that was known from before the return's release, and there was a lot of discussion about that as to why she wasn't in the casting in the year leading up to the release of the return. Because I remember this being a big dialogue point that Donna was not in the return. So I apologize if I shouldn't have said something, but everyone going into the return knew that she wasn't in there.
Okay, that makes me feel better.
So I apologize.
Nah, no worries, man.
But the recasting of Donna was already, people were speculating it was because of her causing problems for the production of Twin Peaks originally. She said it was because of scheduling conflicts.
Well, that just goes with the theme of appearance versus reality, right?
Old Donna, you're right, Jay. Spot on. But no, old Donna had said that she wasn't in Fire Walk with Me because of scheduling issues. And I don't think that anything was ever officially said, but the rumor was that it was because of how much she kind of screwed. Like not only was ABC screwing with the story, but Donna was also. So in the same way Lynch didn't want the studio involved, I don't think he wanted Donna involved anymore either.
Fair enough.
All right, so until next time, the return, the final segment.